Under a single flickering candle in a mud-walled room in the village of Amuda, a young woman named Mary pressed a trembling pen to paper. Outside, the harmattan wind rattled the thin tin roof, and beneath her heart, a child not yet born stirred gently. "My daughter," she wrote, tears blotting the ink before it could dry. "You will never know his name. You will never know that I loved him more than I have ever loved anything in this world, except you." She folded the letter against her chest, then slid it into a small wooden box, already heavy with pages she had never dared to send. She blew out the candle, and the room, like her heart, went quiet. 26 years later, in a marble-floored mansion in Lagos, that same box would surface again, and everything her daughter believed about her would come undone. That single unsent letter held the answer to a question its writer's daughter had carried her whole life. Why her mother's eyes always seemed to hold a weight no amount of comfort could lift. What Sarah had spent years mistaking for coldness was, in truth, grief, folded neatly, hidden for decades, and worn in the shape of love. If you have ever looked at someone quiet and wondered what silence they were carrying, stay with this story until the end, and if it moves you, consider leaving a like so more people find it. Now let this story begin where it truly started. Long before Lagos, long before the money, in a village that hunger visited more often than rain. Mary was born the eldest of 5 children in Amuda, a farming village where the soil cracked under drought, and where a good harvest was spoken of the way other places spoke of miracles. She was sharp-eyed, quick-handed, and stubborn in the gentlest way. The kind of girl who could balance a bucket of water on her head while reciting her multiplication tables under her breath. Determined that poverty would not decide the size of her mind. She dreamed, quietly and fiercely, of becoming a teacher, and she practiced by teaching her younger siblings their letters in the dust with a stick, correcting them with the patience of someone twice her age. It was in that same dust that she met Daniel, the schoolteacher's son, who noticed her long before she noticed him. He was patient where the village was harsh, and gentle where hunger made most people sharp-tongued. He lent her his father's old books after lessons, and listened, really listened, when she spoke of the life she wanted to build. One day, he told her once, sitting beneath a mango tree as the sun dipped low and orange over the fields, "You will stand in front of a classroom, and I will sit in the back row, just to watch you teach." She laughed, and for a while, in that laugh, the famine outside felt very far away. By the time she turned 19, they had promised themselves to each other in the quiet, unofficial way young lovers do, when they have no money for rings, but every intention of keeping their word. But promises could not fill empty stomachs, and the year the rains failed twice in a row, Mary's father collapsed in the field. He could no longer afford to plant. There was no money for the herbalist, let alone a hospital in the city, and Mary watched her mother sell first her wrapper, then her wedding beads, just to buy another week of food for the family. It was in the middle of that desperation that a trader from Lagos, a widower named James Coker, arrived in Amuda to buy cocoa and yams for resale in the city. He noticed Mary at the market, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she negotiated harder than men twice her age, and never once let a buyer cheat her family out of what they were owed. "Come and work in my shop in Lagos," James told her one afternoon, watching her count coins with a precision that impressed him more than he let on. "I will pay you enough to send home every month. Your family will not go hungry again." Mary looked at her father, thin and coughing in the doorway of their hut, and she understood, the way only the eldest child of a struggling family understands, that this was not really a choice at all. She said goodbye to Daniel, under the same mango tree, where he had once promised to watch her teach, and she told him only that she had found work in the city. Nothing more. She did not tell him that some nights, on the long bus ride to Lagos, she pressed her hand to her chest, as though she could physically hold her heart together by force. In Lagos, Mary worked harder than anyone else in James's shop, waking before dawn to open the stalls, and staying long after dusk to balance the accounts by lamplight. Every month, without fail, she sent money home, and every month, her father grew a little stronger, until he could stand in the doorway without coughing at all. James, a quiet man who had lost his first wife to fever years earlier, began to notice something in Mary that he had not seen in a long time. Not romance, not at first, but a kind of steadiness he had stopped believing still existed in the world. Within a year, he sat her down and made his offer as plainly as he made all his business decisions. "Marry me," he said, "and you will never again watch your family go hungry. I cannot promise you the love of a young man's poetry, but I can promise you security, for you and for any children we have." Mary sat with the offer for 3 days. She thought of Daniel's promise beneath the mango tree, and she thought of her father's cough, her mother's sold wedding beads, her younger siblings' hollow cheeks during the worst weeks of the famine. She thought, too, of a child she did not yet have, but somehow already loved, a child she was determined would never learn arithmetic in the dust, because there was no money for a slate, would never watch a parent collapse in a field for want of food. Love, she decided in the end, could take more than one shape. Sometimes it looked like a boy under a mango tree. Sometimes it looked like walking away from him, so that someone not yet born would never have to make the same impossible choice she was making now. She married James Coker 6 months later, in a small ceremony, wearing her mother's mended wrapper, because it was the only beautiful thing she owned. 2 years into the marriage, Mary discovered she was pregnant. And it was then, during a quiet visit back to Amuda for her father's final rites, that the grief she had buried finally rose to the surface. She sat by candlelight, the same kind of candle that had lit her childhood evenings with Daniel, and she began to write, not to send, but simply to say the things she had never allowed herself to say aloud. "My daughter," she wrote, addressing the child she had not yet met, "you will never know his name. You will never know that I loved him more than I have ever loved anything in this world, except you. I gave him up so that you would never have to choose between hunger and love the way I did. I do not know if that makes me strong, or simply a coward who chose the easier grief to carry. But I chose you before you existed, and I would choose you again, every single time." She wrote 3 more letters that night, one to Daniel, though she never sent that one either, one to her late father, and one to herself as a young girl beneath a mango tree. And then she placed them all inside a small wooden box, closed the lid, and did not open it again for 26 years. Sarah was born that winter, into a house of marble floors, uniformed drivers, and a mother who loved her so fiercely and so silently that the love itself became almost invisible. Mary never spoke of Amuda. She never spoke of famine, or of a boy under a mango tree, or of the box she kept locked at the back of the attic, behind old curtains and unused furniture. She built Sarah a childhood entirely free of the hunger she herself had known. And in doing so, without ever meaning to, she built a wall she did not realize she was building. Sarah grew up wanting for nothing, except the one thing that mattered most to a child, to truly understand her own mother. "Why do you never talk about when you were young?" Sarah would ask, and Mary would simply change the subject, or busy her hands with something in the kitchen, until Sarah stopped asking altogether, and decided, quietly, and a little sadly, that her mother simply did not know how to love out loud. As Sarah grew older, that quiet sadness slowly hardened into something closer to frustration. She watched her friends' mothers laugh loudly at family gatherings, trade embarrassing childhood stories over dinner, and hold their daughters' faces in their hands, just to tell them they were loved. Mary did none of these things. She provided school fees paid in full before they were due, a driver waiting outside every event, a wardrobe that wanted for nothing. But she rarely embraced, rarely lingered in a conversation past what was necessary, and never once spoke of feelings unless she had to. "Sometimes I think you love the idea of me more than you actually know me," Sarah had said to her once, during a rare argument, and Mary had only turned away toward the window, saying nothing at all, which had felt to Sarah like the loudest answer of all. It was that same unresolved ache that Sarah carried with her, still unspoken. On the ordinary afternoon, her mother asked for help clearing out the attic. 26 years later, Sarah was a grown woman preparing to move into a home of her own, and her mother had asked her, in one of their rare, careful conversations, to help clear the attic before the movers arrived. It was there, behind a stack of old curtains, that Sarah found the box. Small, wooden, its corners softened with age, tied shut with a ribbon that had once been red and was now the color of dust. She almost left it unopened, assuming it held nothing more than old receipts or forgotten fabric. But something about its weight, heavier than its size suggested, made her sit down right there on the attic floor and lift the lid. Inside were pages upon pages of her mother's handwriting, dated across decades. And as Sarah read, the mother she thought she knew began to dissolve and reform into someone else entirely. A girl who had once dreamed of teaching, who had once loved a boy named Daniel beneath a mango tree, who had once walked away from that love with her chin held high and her heart in pieces, so that a daughter she had not yet met could grow up without ever knowing hunger. Sarah found the letter written during that visit to Amuda, the one addressed simply to my daughter, and she read word for word what her mother had written in trembling candlelight a lifetime ago. That she had chosen Sarah before Sarah existed, and would choose her again, every single time. Sarah sat on that attic floor for a long time, the letters trembling in her hands, and wept, not out of pity, but out of a love so sudden and so overwhelming it felt almost like grief moving in reverse.
She found Mary in the garden, watering plants with the same quiet precision she brought to everything she did, and Sarah held out the box with both hands, unable to trust her own voice at first. "I found these," she finally managed. Mary's face changed the moment she saw the faded ribbon. First fear, then something like relief, as though a burden she had carried alone for 26 years had finally been set down. "I was going to tell you," Mary said softly, though they both knew that was not quite true. "I just never found the right moment." Sarah sat beside her, on the garden bench, and for the first time in her life, she asked her mother to tell her everything. Not the version with the hard edges smoothed over, but the whole of it. The famine and the mango tree and the choice that had cost her everything except the one thing she had chosen to save. And so, for the first time, Mary spoke. She told Sarah about Amuda, about a father who collapsed in a dry field, about a boy named Daniel, who had promised to watch her teach from the back row of a classroom she never got the chance to stand in. She told her about James's offer, about 3 days of silence, weighing love against survival, about a wedding held in her own mother's mended wrapper. "I never once regretted choosing you," Mary said, taking her daughter's hand in both of hers. "But I regretted every single day since, that I could not tell you why I seemed so far away. I was not cold, Sarah. I was simply afraid that if I let myself feel any of it out loud, I would fall apart completely, and you needed me whole." Sarah, through her tears, understood at last that her mother's silence had never been the absence of love. It had been love, carrying more weight than words could ever hold. In that garden, holding her mother's hand and a box of unsent letters, Sarah learned something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. That love does not always announce itself. Sometimes it is loud and easy, spoken freely across a dinner table. But sometimes it is silent, sacrificed quietly, carried alone for decades, and given without any expectation of ever being understood, let alone thanked for it. In the months that followed, Mary and Sarah talked more than they had in the previous 26 years combined. Mary spoke of Amuda without flinching now, and even, once, of Daniel with a tenderness that no longer needed to hide itself behind a closed attic door. She never regretted the choice she made beneath that mango tree all those years ago. She only regretted that she had carried the weight of it alone for so long, when all along, sharing it might have brought her closer to the very daughter she had sacrificed everything to protect. If this story moved you the way it moved Sarah, share it with someone who might need the same reminder that the people who love us hardest are not always the ones who say it the loudest. And thank you, truly, for staying with us until the very end.